Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the hockey edition of Agree or Disagree the podcast. It is Saturday. Of course, it's Kevin Olenek. Lots to get into this week. It's been a very interesting week in Vancouver Canuck land. As always, we'll get into that, and let's touch on other things going around in the National Hockey League. Joined, as always, with Sean from Calgary. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. How are you feeling about being trolled about Matthew Tkachuk?
He's definitely chosen the right time to have a breakout week for the first time in a bit.
Yeah. Joining us as well is Tyler. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Kevin.
You're not being trolled or anything?
No, everybody's leaving me alone. It's good, peaceful, up in northern BC, nice and quiet.
Nice.
As usual.
Joining us for the first time, coming in on what they've called Schneid's time, but he is here, joining us for the first time, living in Calgary, but a diehard Canucks fan. Chris Schneider at Schneid's is joining us as well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. You've had a lot going on as well. We'll maybe get into that a little bit later if you want. But the big news this week is the signing of Quinn Hughes, which had Canucks fans respond something like this. The chorus all over Vancouver. For his part, Quinn Hughes, of course, unfortunately, had a little bit of a scare last weekend during the playoffs with his foot. As he arrived in Vancouver this week, this is what he had to say about that.
I'd probably say around there. I haven't seen a couple days, so I don't know how it feels there, but watching it feels a little bit better with certain movements.
If it has been a regular season game, would you have played that second game against Minnesota?
I mean, I don't know. I want to play every game, but obviously I was a little bit more motivated for this game because it could have been my last, which it was. So.
What about the time frame here in terms of getting on ice for the first time, even first skate?
Yeah, I think they just want to see that MI report, depending on how that goes. And if it's good, then obviously probably see it right away.
And how?
So what was expected later on in the week is he's still in a walking boot, and it was expected to be for a week, out for a week. Of course, we've had this conversation on this before in terms of what we were expecting in terms of Quinn Hughes not playing 10 games because that would expect his expansion availability for Seattle. But now comes the fact that if he even plays one game, it counts against his 1 year of the contract. So this becomes the question as the season rolls on here. It's expected, some are expecting that the possibility of the debut will be next Saturday against the Calgary Flames, which would be quite a fascinating parallel, remembering Johnny Gaudreau's debut a number of years ago against the Vancouver Canucks. But I guess the first question to bring up here, or the thought process, is it worth playing Quinn Hughes at all this year?
Oh, it totally is. At this point, the Canucks need to be selling hope and the future, and that's what Quinn Hughes is. And as much as losing a year on his contract can be an issue, I don't think it's something that you really have to get too up in arms about, because he is the future of the Canucks blue line, and you need to start selling that and give him a few games to figure out what the NHL game looks like.
And I think the organization wants to see what they have with him in the mix and what kind of pairs they could have and how ready he is. If you're not going to negatively impact his status for the expansion draft, and you're not going to get him a year closer to unrestricted free agency, then I don't think there's much harm in getting him in there, even outside of marketing and selling hope reasons.
And yeah, I have to agree with both of the other two. I basically stole my points.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if it was an expensive, I do think it's from a marketing standpoint. I mean, you even look at what happened in Ottawa. They brought in the prospect that they got for Mark Stone in, and I think it's important for the fan base to see Quinn Hughes and to get hope. I think that's important. But I also think for Quinn Hughes, as Adam Gaudette said, there's such a value in understanding what the NHL game is like and what to prepare for next season and what you need to do to prepare in the off season. And you've seen a big improvement from Adam Gaudette in terms of what's his play throughout the season, that I can't see this hurting Quinn Hughes in any way, shape, or form. I can only see this helping. And it even helped Brock Besser.
Like Brock, where we only played him for I think 4 or 5 games, but it gave both him and the fans a taste of him at the NHL level.
Yeah, and it's just something to get. I mean, there's a lot of excitement about him already. Whether it's too high or not, I guess that's a whole other debate for another time. But I think people want to see what they have, and especially going into next season where this defense is pretty much up in flux, no matter how well you look at it or which way you look at it. This defense is pretty much in flux. I think that everybody needs to see where Quinn Hughes is at and where they need to build going forward. The other news, actually, I wanted to get into this because before we get into Loui Ericksson, because we haven't had Chris on the show yet. Chris, what has been your impressions of the Canucks this year? What have you liked, and what has bothered you this year?
Obviously I wasn't going into this season with super high expectations, but I was, maybe hoping that we were going to do 5 or 10 points better, at least, pushing for a playoff spot, as opposed to petering out for this past month that we have been. Ultimately, I wouldn't say this season has been a disappointment, but it definitely hasn't raised the bar as much as I was hoping initially.
So what has specifically disappointed you?
Obviously players like Pettersson have been great, but it's more so the secondary scoring and maybe the development of some of the younger prospects advancing the game a little bit further.
So those two. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into Mr. Loui Ericksson. He was scratched. It was a healthy scratch for the game against the New York Rangers, which they won. He was back in the lineup last night. Here's what Travis Green had to say about that after the Rangers game.
Yeah, never an easy decision to sit a guy that's been in the league a long time. You've seen it happen, around the league a few times. And, it's hard for guys that have been in the league. So it wasn't an easy decision.
Why now?
You know what? To be honest, it's not like I'm sitting here saying he's played so bad that I'm going to take him out of the lineup. I wanted to put Granny back in, and he was the guy that drew out. Simple.
So here is Loui Eriksson's statistics, just for everyone's information. When he left into the Boston Bruins in 2015-2016, he played 82 games. He scored 30 goals, 33 assists, 63 points. In 3 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks, he actually has finally matched that 30-goal plateau. He has 31 goals. He has almost 20. He has just passed the assist mark a little bit by 38, which has given him a total of 69 points. So he has just recently passed his entire 2015-16 season in his career with the Vancouver Canucks. So was this too late? Was this on time? What were your guys' thoughts on the scratching of Loui Ericksson?
I think it was too late. The play that Loui has had the last season, even into the season before, has been lackluster at best. His skating is completely gone. He doesn't have the wheels anymore to keep up with the game that just keeps getting younger and faster. And it just completely shows. There's lots of people who think that he doesn't show the effort, but I just think that's because he doesn't have the wheels and the skating legs anymore to keep up. He's been an okay penalty killer for the Canucks, but that's it. And I think it's time to move on and find a way to open up his roster spot for a younger, faster player.
I have to say I'm a little bit surprised that he got the healthy scratch. It's always a big decision for a team to take when they sit a guy with a contract that big and with that many years left. I didn't see him as completely useless, but that's not saying much for a guy that's making that kind of money and he's playing on the fourth line. He didn't seem to be taking that and trying to figure out a way forward to improve his game. It just kind of got stagnant to the point where the coach has sat other people and he's looking at the names on the lineup card there and saying, yeah, you know what? It's his turn to sit out. I think is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, as well as with Loui, like Jim was saying that they're potentially hinting at trying to move him in the offseason, and sitting him as a healthy scratch is probably not going to help his value as far as, the currency in the open market. So, yeah, it's hard to see really where they're going to go from here with that.
Well, what was interesting also was it wasn't on this clip, but I heard Travis Green says you need to give me a reason to keep you in the lineup, and he hasn't necessarily, and it's not like Granlund has been like someone that's really important to get in and out of the lineup, because we've talked about Granlund a lot this year, and he hasn't been lighting it up either. I mean, I don't know what you would get for Loui Ericksson anyway. I mean, I think that there are going to be teams simply because they like Ottawa and even probably in Arizona. There'll be teams that need to grab players because they need to hit that salary floor. So I think that there will be some value in that, maybe a little bit more value in that. But I mean, what you get for him or what you get for him, I don't know. I tend to think, though, that this was a little bit too late. I think that there was an opportunity. There was an opportunity to bring some prospects in or someone else in to give a little bit of a message, because we've talked a little bit about this before, and Tyler Shipley kind of observed this when we talked about Goldobin. Like, why if it feels like was a bit of a double standard in terms of how Travis Green treats the veterans as opposed to he treats the newcomers, and there's a different expectation there. Because we've seen Goldobin not perform, fairly or not, and he dealt with a healthy scratch. But this has been 3 seasons of Loui Ericksson not performing, and this is the first time he's been scratched.
Yeah, it just hasn't worked out with Loui and the Canucks. And even if you look at the dollar amount that the Canucks will have paid out to him come July 1st, the Canucks, I believe, will have only $9 million to pay him left in actual real dollars. So for the teams like Ottawa and Arizona who need to get up to the cap floor, it's a good contract to acquire money wise, to get a high cap hit player to help them get there.
I mean, the other option is Utica, what they did with Sam Gagner. Do you think that's possible? Or I'm kind of thinking that Aquilini would cringe at doing that again.
Yeah, I mean, that's one you'd have to run up the ladder with the owner to see if he's comfortable with burying a guy in the minors. They have done it before, so it's not impossible, I guess. I don't see how he would get claimed on the waiver with that kind of contract. But you can never be too sure. You asked the question earlier, Kevin, what would you get for Loui Ericksson? How about cap relief? Just moving him would be a start. So, but obviously they'd be hoping to get some kind of draft pick return or something.
I think it just doesn't matter what you get in return. If you can get rid of him, it's not necessarily the cap relief, but the roster spot that opens up is big. So it doesn't really matter what you get in return as long as you get rid of him.
Yeah. Chris, were you going to say something? Oh, Chris, are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here. I just said, I agree.
Oh, okay.
Else to add.
Okay. The other news that happened last night, although this is the second one that happened this season. Of course, Antoine Roussel went down in the Rangers game for the season. And just quickly to touch on Roussel, I do think that this guy has been a really valuable member of the Canucks. Has it been spectacular? No, but he has been a guy that you can play with pretty much anyone. I think he's given the team some life. That game against Vegas, I found that he was one of the guys that made an effort at least. I've never seen him not make an effort in a hockey game, at least this year. I don't know what your quick thoughts on Roussel and his value to the team going forward.
Well, Roussel just quickly became the heartbeat of the locker room and the Canucks. You could ask him where the headspace of the team was, and he could be able to give you the answer. And he just, as you said, Kevin, you can play him up and down the lineup with anyone. If someone, and he can drag the more skilled players into the battles and get them with a little more energy and pull them into the game a little bit more. So he's very important to the Canucks' future for the next couple of years at the very least.
Chris, I'll let you go.
Like an offensive upgrade on what Dorsett was for our roster last season.
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with that. Dorsett was a pretty huge loss, though, overall to the team, I think. But, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You need that grit still.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we saw again the other night with Kreider and Pettersson. Nobody reacts to that. Yeah, they did get the 5 in the game called there, and Pettersson came back and seems to be fine. But just another example of a non-response. And back in the Dorsett days, I mean, everybody knew he'd be out there fighting somebody, whether then or later in the game. So he was a pretty effective deterrent, and the Canucks don't have that anymore.
Or at the very least, just jawing at them incessantly and, getting under their skin for doing something like that.
Yeah.
Which Roussel is good at.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Besser went after Kreider, but you don't want Brock Besser to be going after Chris Kreider. You want a Roussel type, a Dorsett type to do that.
Or if you're Hot Night in Canada, you want Goodbranson to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about that on the podcast here. I was a fan of Goodbranson's toughness, but I mean, it is a league where you have to offer something a little more than that to maintain your spot. Agreed. That was the unfortunate part for Goodbranson. He's definitely a heart and soul guy. Just couldn't defend. Just couldn't do it consistently.
And to be fair to the guys on the ice, that Kreider incident was a little weird. I think it caught a lot of people off guard. I know I didn't see it until the replay. So I think it was Besser and Levo both sort of went after Kreider for a little bit and gave him face wash for it. And had he not been kicked out of the game, I think he would have had to answer the bell.
Are you okay with the $5,000 fine?
No, I think that was he got off light. I think he should have gotten a game for that.
I'm gonna maybe partially disagree with that. I mean, the fine, the amount of the fine is not very much. It's kind of, you can just snicker at the amount of the fine, but for him to get a 5 in the game, they lost the game. Pettersson returned. And then they still did the public shaming with a fine. I mean, as far as comparing that to other supplementary discipline that happens around the NHL, it's not like ridiculously offside or out of line. But, I mean, obviously, Pettersson's our guy. We're Pettersson people, so we would have liked to seen something more there. But I was, frankly, I was surprised that they even issued the fine.
Yeah, if there wasn't the 5 in the game, then I would say give them a game suspension. But the fact that they did do the 5 in the game right away, yeah, I'm fine with just the $5,000 fine.
I don't know. I see both sides of this. If this was okay, yeah, I got to say it. If this was McDavid, the Oilers' Twitter would have went off.
Oh, yeah. There would have been way more screaming for sure.
Yeah. And the Oilers' media would have went off and said that Connor McDavid is getting this again, this, that, and that again. So
I would say as well, Kevin, if this happened to a Montreal Canadiens player, you'd probably get some big noise there too, given that history a few years back with Kreider crashing into Carey Price. I'm sure Chris Kreider's not well liked in Habs Nation.
No. I guess for me, if you would have, I would have rather have had nothing been done than a $5,000 fine, because that feels like lip service. It's to me like I guess it's either a suspension or nothing. I guess for me to be that black and white, like $5,000 doesn't feel like much. Like it's just like
It's the public shaming part of it, right? I mean, the player's name is in the news, and it's not good news. You know, I mean, $5,000 is a drop in the bucket to most NHL players.
Yeah, I don't.
Kevin Bieksa has said in the past that it's not really a deterrent for them.
No,
well, there you go.
No.
I mean, remember when Brandon Prust speared Brad Marchand and said it was the best $5,000 he ever spent? You know,
wasn't there a GoFundMe from Canucks fans that day too, or something?
I think so.
Yeah.
I know Habs fans that I'm friends with were applauding that too. So
yeah. Flames. The NHL was applauding that. But that led to another injury to Chris Tanev, and there's a tweet out from a guy named Chris Cont79 that goes through the list of injuries that Chris Tanev has had the last few seasons. And we don't have time to go through it. That's how long this is. But I know that there are some that want to make this lessens his value, and I know that some of the media here want to make some light jokes about why Chris Tanev gets hurt all the time. I actually legitimately feel bad for this human being. As Sean mentioned off air, Tanev actually spent the offseason trying to get some equipment to get his own equipment to deal with this that was much more effective. It's not like this guy is trying to get hurt. He's legitimately wants to play the game of hockey, and it's like just such I feel bad for this guy.
Yeah, it's a tough position for the organization, because what they really need is to have him and Edler be healthy and play 70 games a season, and neither of them are able to do that, and they're putting them in a tough position. I think it is time this summer to look at whether or not they can, if the right deal comes along, they can find a way to move him and get something for him. But it's not something that they really need to explore intensively, because he does, when he is in the lineup and playing, he is so valuable to them.
Yeah, I heard Botchford recently talking about the fact that everyone still keeps on referring to Edler and Tanev as their number one, but they really need to just overhaul the defense right now, because if you put those two guys on another team, I doubt that they're going to be your 1 and 2 pairing, or your 1 and 2 guy.
Yeah, I see it the same way there. I mean, it was already apparently tough getting some kind of trade to happen with Chris Tanev. I mean, every year he's speculated as being a potential trade piece, and then it doesn't happen. And I've said before, you have to wonder whether teams are looking at him as unreliable in terms of staying in the lineup.
They're
not
trying
going
to
to give
become
up
the
much
new
for that.
Sammy Sallow in that regard.
Yeah.
Can't remember who tweeted it out, but I saw a tweet basically putting the Canucks record with Edler and Tanev in the lineup versus with one of them, at least one of them out of the lineup, and the Canucks are like 10 games under 500 with one of those guys injured, and 7 games above 500 with them in the lineup. So it's, as much as we want that, the numbers in terms of wins and losses don't lie in terms of how valuable they really are.
I still think Alex Edler can help a team. I think, is it top 2? No. Can he play it often top 4 minutes on a few teams in this league? Probably. He's still getting a good chunk of ice time. I don't think he's been necessarily that ineffective. And as mentioned by Sean, he's been able to win. I do agree with Tanev. The problem isn't his ability. The problem is his reliability, or the perception if he can stay on the ice. But he's also one of those guys, if he can keep healthy in a playoff run, there's an old saying that you can never have too many defensemen. I think that a playoff team would find some value in that. But I don't know. I still think even going into next year, with what's coming up in terms of the young, you've got Quinn Hughes, you've got Loui Ericksson. I don't think it hurts to have that mentoring sidekick there like Alex Edler, helping him out, get at least learning and understanding the game.
For sure, and it also appears that he has no real desire to leave this franchise either. He's not leaving. Although I think that there's a legitimate debate about how many years, but yeah. And
I think that's why we haven't seen an extension yet, is because there's a legit divide between the organization and Tanev as to how many years should be on the next contract.
Yeah. And if he needs to be part of that Seattle expansion list.
Yeah.
Which I think you could possibly sell him on. I mean, it's not far from here. I don't know. But I'm not in his head, right? I just, I guess one of the things when I was listening to Ken Danico yesterday on the pregame or the pre-pregame show on 650, one of the things that he talked about is he would rather have been part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And maybe that's where Edler is kind of thinking, right? I don't want to go away. I want to help and see if I can make this team win, which is, I guess, an admirable trait. But
yeah, and it's he definitely does want to be part of the solution here, and we'll see what happens. But hopefully, the Canucks can get that right contract done and move on, because I think he does add something very valuable to the Canucks blue line, as is Chris Tanev when he isn't injured.
Which leads. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that the disagreement on the term is definitely something I can understand, because like Edler's perspective, they saw that contract that Beagle got, and they're like, well, he's the same age as me. Why does he get 4 and you guys don't want to do 4 for me? But you can also see from the Canucks perspective where you kind of want to transition him out of the lineup at this point and maybe not want to give him 4 years, even though defensemen typically tend on being more reliable at older ages than forwards.
Yeah. Which leads us to the guy handing out the contracts, the guy that has to make the decision on how long, the guy that has to make the decision on the trades. There has been a lot of criticism this month. It even got to the point during the Vegas game that there has been a chant and it has trended on Twitter, fire Benning. It is becoming a question of whether Jim Benning is the guy to carry this rebuild forward. I'll get into there's an interesting tweet in comparison to what's going on in Vancouver and Toronto, but Where are you guys on that? Do you think that how long would you give Jim Benning on this, or is it time to move on, or are you like this is I think it's time to keep let's see what he can do.
Well, we have to remember that it was just about this time last year that they extended Jim Benning. So to go from an extension to a multi-year extension to firing him in the season after, I don't think is realistic. I do think that he's going to get he'll get next year to see if the Canucks can take a step forward and not be a basement team. And if they do make some strides, then I think that'll give him some more leash. But he's got at least one more year left.
I would argue for 2 years before they even give any thought to the idea of making a change there. But yeah, the next year in particular is key. You know, if they take another step backwards, then I think he's in trouble. I mean, my feeling with ownership is if they look like they're close and they don't feel like he's the right guy, then they'll make a change then. But I think on drafting and just on drafting alone, I think Benning's been able to earn himself that extension and earn some leash from ownership. I think the owner's pleased with what he's been able to do in terms of drafting and give the fans some optimism around younger players. So yeah, I don't know. I know the province newspaper wants to run him out of town, but I don't think that's the right course of action at all right now.
Yeah, for me, it's not the right timing if that's what you want to do. Like, let him finish out his plan, if you will. Give him another year, possibly two, to actually try and get this rebuild into high gear at this point. Because now you want to get it to the point where the young players are now starting to step into their own. And if you fire him right now and bring in a new GM, I think that they would try and have too many fresh ideas and would basically mess up what we currently have going for us.
What is Jim Benning's strength? I mean, I guess it's obvious. I guess the obvious part is drafting. But what else do you see from Jim Benning? Like, what do you see as a strength with this guy?
Oh, his drafting for the most part has been good. I think the first couple seasons left a little bit to be desired, as we saw last night with Matthew Tkachuk getting 5 points and having a really good season, and Loui Ericksson hasn't made the show yet. But for the most part, he's done really well, especially the last couple years with getting Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson in the first round, and we're seeing Adam Gaudette stepping in after coming out of college. We're seeing Madden looking really good with Northeastern, as well as Jet Wu looking really good with Moose Jaw. I think there's a lot to be a lot of stuff that needs to be praised in terms of what he's set up with Judd Brackett and the amateur scouting department. That I would say his strength. But his weakness has definitely been more on the pro side with player acquisitions.
Yeah, free agent signings is definitely his weakest point.
Yeah, and there's a few trades there too where the exchange there is leaving people scratching their heads a little bit. But both on trades and free agent signings, I mean, if you're feeling the pressure to make moves, whether that's from the public, the media, or ownership. If you're being kind of pressured into making deals that you may not really want to make anyways, then you're going to start to see some poor deals there, and we see that with all general managers. But the question is his drafting making up for that? I think everybody has a different view on that.
Well, this is the tweet that Sean messaged because this was in response to JD Burke's. Overall lack of prospect depth is a result of 5 years of trading away picks. From 2014 to 2018, Toronto has had 42 picks. Vancouver's had 34. Of Toronto's 42, only 6 players have played games in the NHL. Of Vancouver's 34, 10 have played games. And he's pointed out, it's Ian Lusher that brought this up. T.O.'s drafting has been extremely bad. Only player outside of first round that has remotely made an impact is Travis Dermott in the second round. Vancouver's had a few hits, got at Forsling and Tramkin. It's hard to say that Forsling and Tramkin are making an impact when they're not on the roster. And I've found players like first Besser and McCann, although McCann is playing very well in Pittsburgh, it's, I guess, a good point. He also says picked up Demko a high second. T.O.'s draft hoarding strategy has done nothing to help their rebuild because Riley, Kadri, JVR, Bozek, and Kessel were already there and not at a prime. So I guess in terms of where this guy is coming from, Vancouver's drafting isn't terrible. And I mean, he also goes on to point out that Vancouver won a lottery in getting Austin Matthews. I mean, they didn't really win the lottery, but they got a first pick. And they were able to get Frederick Anderson in a trade, right? So, and John Tavares, obviously. So that obviously is why they put him ahead. But
well, I guess one of the questions you have to ask here too of the players that the Canucks drafted that played in the NHL. I mean, how many of those only got a small number of games and aren't playing anymore? And I have to dig into that a little deeper, I think.
Yeah, that's true too. Because I mean, it's simple to say that someone has played a game, but someone making a legitimate impact, I think, is different to me.
But that's the other thing is how many players, because the Leafs have added a lot of those extra picks that the Leafs added were 5th and 6th and 7th round picks, right? So how much does adding one or two more of those late round picks really swing the odds of you getting a NHL player who can play regular minutes versus someone who's just going to end up, say, toiling in the AHL at the very best? Because when you look at it, in each of those late rounds, you're lucky the league is lucky to see 2 or 3 of those players play in the NHL at that point. So adding one more draft pick in those late rounds doesn't necessarily change the actual odds of you getting a player to add to your roster from that. I think there is a good opportunity to add picks and stuff for asset reasons, and I think that's one thing that is missed in that thread of tweets is that some of those picks that they picked up they ended up swapping for NHL players later on. But in terms of what the Canucks have done, the first few years of the drafting wasn't that great. They got a couple hits, like the Demko, the Gaudette, Tramp, played a couple season and a half. But lately, they definitely look to have a little bit more. They seem to have a bit more success with. Like I said, Madden's looking good. You've got Cole Lind and Gadjevich who are playing as really young AHLers and they look like they're starting to figure things out. So I think it's patience. The Canucks fans need to have patience with the drafting, and they don't necessarily need to hammer on the continue to acquire picks for the acquiring picks sake.
And as far as the two teams' different trajectories, like you have to consider, like Toronto's far more successful right now. So of course their draft picks of the past couple years are not going to have as strong of a chance. Just like the guys that the Canucks drafted in 2008, 2009 probably weren't going to make that 2010, 2011 season. So the draft picks that the Canucks have had the past couple years are going to have better chances at making the NHL or at least getting a look.
Yeah, but in terms of like any of those players in the third rounds or later, it's always a bit more of I think that comes down to scouting as opposed to being just higher up in the draft, because there's just at that point you're looking at players who have issues, and it's all about what you see in a player more than their current skill. So I think the Canucks have done a lot better, despite the fact that they have been drafting higher than the Leafs, because I think it's a little more of a lottery once you get into those mid to late rounds.
Yeah, Johnny Gaudreau was a later round pick. And Pavel, that comes down to scouting and a little bit of luck there too. But even, the draft is a bit of luck in a lot of ways. Austin Matthews may not have turned out. Connor McDavid may not. Alexander Daigle was expected to be an absolute superstar in the NHL. He never turned out. There's a lot of players that just simply don't turn out. There's a bit of luck to how someone drafts. Obviously there's scouting and research that comes in there, but it's not. There's some luck that plays in that a little bit as well.
Absolutely. Look at the first overall pick that was picked before the Sedins.
That's right.
Patrick Steffen.
Yeah, I had to kind of wait, who was that?
Yeah. That's why I didn't mention his name.
Yeah, Ray Ferraro's favorite.
Yeah. So in terms of games played, here's some of the top 5 fourth-round picks. I just pulled this up that have played games in the NHL. Keith Yandel, Ryan Callahan, Nicholas Chalmers, Craig Smith, TJ Brody. I think the highest points guy, is Yandel at 521. There's some like J.B. Peugeot. There's Tobias Reeder. There's Johnny Gaudreau, Justin Falk, Ben Sherratt. There is some pretty solid players there, but other than Gaudreau, it's really hard to find someone that is an absolute superstar in this league. Like Victor Mete, on and off, Brett Kulak, on and off in the NHL. So, and I'm just looking at fourth rounders. Philip Grubauer is a backup in the NHL. It's really hard to find someone that's going to be a forever superstar as a fourth round pick or on. So
yeah, you're looking at depth players more than anything else after the first round. In all honesty, and if you get anything more, then you're laughing.
Yeah, Datsuk is really like a lottery win, or someone even like Jannik Hansen isn't on the same level, obviously, but getting someone that late is pretty much the equivalent of winning the 649.
Yeah. Even in the NFL, how many players were picked ahead? Tom Brady, right? So, that's a lottery pick, turns out, right? So, I don't know. I think, yeah, some patience there. But what do you think is, in your opinion, what was Benning's best move?
Can we say getting Josh Levo?
That was mine.
Yeah. I know it's more of a recent move to kind of remember, but in terms of who won the trade, I think that one's pretty definitive.
Yeah, I would say Josh Levo is definitely the best pro player acquisition that he's made, and it's not even close. Which says a lot.
I have to agree.
Yeah. Berchi may be a good second, but unfortunately he's not playing right now. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. In terms of trade, I do think that needs to be I do agree with you. Hopefully that changes, but it's not much there. But I guess we'll see going forward on that. While we're at it, where are we with Travis Green? How many years do we want to give this guy?
I think he's on the same sort of timeline as Jim Benning. You look at, I think he's done some good stuff in terms of helping Brock Besser, Jake Virtanen, Nikolai Goldobin develop. But I think there's still some question marks. I don't know if it's him or maybe it's a Newell Brown thing, but the way the Canucks enter the zone on the power play, the way they set up on the power play, the way they set up on the offensive zone on 5-on-5 leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion as Sean in the sense that now would also not be the time, but I'm not 100% sold on him as a long-term coach either. There's inconsistencies there that you definitely would want to see improved on.
I wonder, if the team progresses and they get closer to being an actual playoff team and everything, how he handles players. Like it kind of feels to me like Green's trying a one-size-fits-all sort of way of handling his players. And I don't know how well that works when you start getting some bigger personalities in there, and the chances of winning are a lot better. I mean, right now when you've got a team with no superstars on it, and other than Pettersson, and he's new, I think it's easy for him to play the tough love approach and sit guys and this and that. But I don't know how well that's going to work. Say 3-4 years down the road.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. On the other, just because I'm curious what you think, because the previous GM before was Mike Gillis, obviously got the team to the Cup. What was his best move?
Gillis's best move?
Yeah, because the drafting, Chris was right, the drafting there wasn't exactly stellar, but what was his best move?
Ooh, I think bringing in Dan Hughes as a free agent was probably the best move, because it just allowed their defense to slot into better spots and them to be a little more comfortable playing the minutes that they were.
I'm going to go with Christian Ehrhoff. I think that was the one that really gave them a legitimate power play in the playoffs. And then once he was gone, it just wasn't the same.
Yeah, as far as the team that he brought to the Stanley Cup final, I would have to say Ehrhoff is probably the biggest steal. But if we're talking about potential gifts for the next GM, I would have to say getting Horvat or the 9th pick for Schneider actually was probably pretty smart as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yes. Future,
even though no one liked it at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was certainly a surprise. Like, wait, you met Roberto Luongo, Gary, right? No, it was Cordy. Yeah. You spelled Roberto Luongo wrong.
I think you're going to want to hear this.
Yeah, classic. One of the best, best things going. Let's go on to some other NHL things. And so Mitch Milani from the Bottom Line View and I often chat, because we often talk about the NFL, and we chat a little bit about the NHL because he helps out on John Vivero's Hot Take Hockey, because they both go to Ryerson. And Mitch is always reminding us through the NFL free agency, all the players that are about to sign with the New England Patriots, which is apparently the entire NFL. They only visit New England and they somehow sign elsewhere, but New England's in on everything. But anyway, he's a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and he always reminds us too when Pittsburgh is winning. And he pointed something out about that Pittsburgh is in for a long, deep cup run. Which led me to think, I'm like, really? Because we're assuming it's Tampa Bay, or like Pittsburgh could be facing Tampa Bay in the first round, possibly. Mm-hmm. I think, are we underestimating the Pittsburgh Penguins?
I think there's more teams that are a little more exciting than the Penguins at this point, which a lot of people are focusing on. But they're a team that you can't sleep on when you've got Crosby, Malkin up the middle. They've made some smart moves to acquire Nick Bjugstad and Jared McCann, and don't forget about you can list the players that are on their roster on and on and on. And when Matt Murray's on, he's about as good as a goaltender as you can get. So I don't think there is a real I don't think there's a real reason to sleep on them, other than the fact that there's other teams that are getting the focus because of where they are, aka Toronto, Boston, and what they did at the deadline, Columbus.
Yeah, Columbus is in such a precarious position. It's going to be so fascinating what happens if they don't make the playoffs, or even if they do. It's so intriguing.
Pittsburgh 7-1-2 in their last 10 games, so they're heating up at the right time.
Yeah. You mean Columbus, or Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they are. And I still think 87 is the best player in this game. I'm sorry, Oiler fans, I just do. I think that's been proven. But what do you guys? What other thoughts are there out there?
It's such a tight league, so like I can totally see them making a run if with the things fall the right way. They get a couple bounces, maybe get the right first round matchup. Yeah, I could definitely see them making a run, but it's so tight in the East specifically. If we look at the standings,
yeah, I was just pulling.
You've got right now they would be playing the Islanders in the first round, so that's definitely a matchup that they could walk in and take it quicker than a lot of people would expect if you just looked at the point totals.
And then they got Washington, which they have beaten most of the time.
Yeah.
And Tampa, I know they're 54-13-4, and God loves them, but they've only been. You never know, eh?
Yeah, the Penguins have the firepower to play with the Lightning if that's what the matchup they end up with. So, but I don't think they're going to end up with that. They're 4 points up on both Carolina and Columbus, who are the wild card team. So it looks more like they're going to be battling with the Islanders, and maybe even if they can stay hot, they still have a chance to win the division too.
Yeah,
yeah,
they're only 4 points back.
It's definitely looking like they're going to be in that Metropolitan Division bracket. The thing is, when you get to the third round, it's attrition by that point. Injuries starts to mess around with teams' plans. So I don't know. I mean, I'm always a believer in Pittsburgh's depth. They always seem to be able to plug in some other guys and keep going. So no reason to be down on Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay, though, geez, if they don't make the Stanley Cup final this year, what a disappointment that'll be.
Yeah, that would be something to talk about for sure. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I would never count Pittsburgh out of it, but at the same time, I'm not sure if they have the firepower to make it past maybe the Eastern final. I just don't see them in the Cup final this season, but that's just my take.
Yeah.
But like Noble said, do not count Tampa Bay out of it either. They need to make that Stanley Cup final this season because they're overperforming otherwise.
Well, it's been well over 10 years that a President's Trophy winner has won a Stanley Cup, which is
mind-blowing.
Absolutely mind-blowing. That is crazy. So you guys, I'm curious here. We kind of talked about this in the chat, so I thought I just would quickly bring this up before we go on to the next topic. Do you remember that time that you heard the head coach of the Canucks or Daniel and Henrik Sedin talk about disrespecting an opponent?
Nope.
It's drawing a blank here.
No, dear, I don't also recall Jerome McGinley or the Flames coaching staff at any point saying that they disrespected an opponent. So how did the Edmonton Oilers, who were not in a playoff spot, prepare for the New Jersey Devils, who that's not a great team? Let's be honest. It's not the team on the ice is not a great team. They have some pieces that are injured. How does a leadership group and a coaching staff in a playoff battle, there's kind of still in it, disrespect an opponent? How? Could someone explain that to me?
I don't know. I don't understand how they think they're still in the playoff run. They are 8 points out with 12 games to play. But I don't know. I think it just shows how much of a mess they are up there in Edmonton, and how I think there's some players up there that just don't have the mental game to be successful, to be winners. They're just collecting a paycheck and going home.
Lucic.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing for sure. You know, like I don't know. I mean, maybe they're starting to run low on gas here. They look at New Jersey and think it shouldn't be too hard. Then they got I don't know how many road games they have, but they're on the road tonight against Arizona. I mean, I don't understand that either. I mean, how can you be looking past anybody when you're not in the playoffs? I don't get that.
Somehow Edmonton still finds ways to surprise people on how they can embarrass themselves. Yes.
It's true. It's something. It's quite fascinating to me how they do that. But Connor McDavid has his points, and from that end, everything is hunky dory, and the fans are still going and turning in the turnstiles and making Daryl Cates some money. So maybe they're okay with what's going on in Edmonton. I don't know. It seems like ownership doesn't really care.
Yeah, I mean, what is okay to an Edmonton Oilers fan? I mean, if they keep going to the games, why? Or is it because of McDavid? Is it because the building's new? Is it because there's not very much to do in Edmonton? Maybe it's all those things. I don't know. But if you really want to get some change, you got to stop going. I mean, that's what happens in Vancouver when it grabs the owner's attention in a hurry. When the product sucks and the people don't go, changes are made.
Yeah, like in Vancouver, it went from a 4 or 6 year wait to get onto season tickets to them having a fire sale and anyone could get season tickets. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean now you can easily, outside of a game against Toronto or something, you can easily get reasonably priced tickets 2 hours before the game. Yeah. Through Ticketmaster. It's not even through the resale. It's just the tickets are available.
Yeah.
But I find it the same way here in Calgary as well. The Albertan fans, they love their team and they go regardless of how good or bad they are. So I guess it's just the style of fan, I guess.
I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit there, and I say this from a Flames perspective. I will give the Oiler fan credit for this. They hang with that team through thick and thin. There is no question about it. But I tweeted about this, and I got some heat for this, but I thought it was absolutely embarrassing that a first-place team competing for a Stanley Cup got absolutely run over by Maple Leafs. I get that the Maple Leafs travel very well, but that, to me, the Flames, out of all of the 3 teams in Western Canada, and I say this as a Flames supporter, I think the Flames at times come across one of the most bandwagon fan bases in the NHL, or out of this 3. I think the Canuck fans, I've seen them go through thick and thin and say, okay, we'll still support this team. I see downtown, there's still Canuck jerseys walking to the game. Maybe the seats are empty right now. Oiler fans are loyal, but the Flame fans, there has been a history of inconsistency with that. From where I've
I think one thing you have to look at though is that when the tickets went on sale at the beginning of the season, did anyone really expect the Flames to be this good?
That's a fair point. I get that. But it just for me, it's just and I know that they dominate. I know the Leaf fans were all excited because this has probably been the best team in a while. I just was like, this is so painful for me to watch.
Yeah,
it's just, I don't know.
Well, and the visual too, right? The sea of red is so prominent. You don't see that really anywhere else in the NHL. That consistent look of the red in the seats, and then you get a game against Toronto, and there's all this blue there. But I mean, this is the same in all the Western Canadian situations. When the tickets go on sale, the fans that want to catch that one Toronto game scoop up the tickets right away.
Yeah, and it's understandable. They're a popular team. I'm not saying that anything about that. I just wish I wish that the Flame fans just turned up a little bit more. That's all.
The Flames fans, especially in the lower bowl, though, are also very quiet. It's such a white collar. It's getting better, but it has been for years such a white collar, quiet business sort of atmosphere that when the Go Leafs go chants get going in the dome, or when Montreal's in town, when the Go Habs go chants get going, it just they drown out everything. And you have to give Vancouver always seems to fight back a lot more than Calgary does in terms of showing cheering on their team.
Yeah,
I agree. Like the lower bowl, the dome is a lot more corporate. It's kind of very similar in terms to Rogers Arena in Vancouver. Like they both have very quiet lower bowls that are not very, I guess, into the game. But I will give the Calgary fans the Calgary lower bowl people some credit in the sense that they at least wear jerseys more consistently.
Well, they probably could afford them. But
That's fair. Or disposable income out here.
Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, it's just but I'm not right. Like I get why Leaf fans are showing up. Don't get me wrong. I totally get it. I think it's fun and all of that. I just wish for more home presence. But that's just me.
Canada's most valuable.
Okay. Cool. I'm going to read this for here. And this was a really great article from The Athletic about Jamie Baker. I'll just read a little bit about this. From this, just a little bit. Throughout the game, Baker chimes in with deft hockey analysis, augmenting the commentary of his play-by-play partner, Randy Hahn. He diagrams a skating play with Thomas Hertl on the Sharks' penalty kill, noting where he switches with a teammate to aid a puck-clearing attempt. He adds cheerfully about the beautiful details at Detroit's new Little Caesars Arena, and he jokes about a renowned hockey camp in Deerwood, Minnesota that is said to be punishing. For this game, on January 31st, 2018, he's clad in a sharp blue suit, orange shirt, patterned tie, and austere pocket square. His analysis seems easy and effortless, his demeanor upbeat. At the start of the third period, he discusses the superlative play from Sharks goaltender Martin Jones, who held a buzzing Detroit squad scoreless through the first 40 minutes. There is nothing to suggest to viewers or to those around him that anything is amiss. But during the second intermission, Baker made a decision with both urgency and permanence. He pulled out his phone, booked a flight home to California, and resumed his day's work as if nothing was wrong. In those 20 minutes between the periods, Jamie Baker decided to end his life. So Jamie Baker this week, you got a little bit of play. It got probably sidetracked by a number of other things, but I did want to bring this up because he was very courageous this week, not only with The Athletic, with Katie Strang, but doing a number of interviews about where he has been and what he has been through in the last year. And we've talked a little bit here about mental health. Sean made some points about what happened at the Pig and Duke in Calgary. And this was another reminder to me about the importance of this conversation and what Jamie Baker went through. So did you guys have a chance to see that article or see the video? Or I think Tyler was the one that pointed this out to me, actually.
Yeah. I actually saw his clip with Randy Hahn there when the Sharks were in Winnipeg. They did a segment between periods there, and he's obviously quite emotional trying to talk about the whole going public with his mental struggles thing. And then I did read the Katie Strang article as well. It's just another reminder about you never really know what's going on inside people's heads, and in sports, it's so easy to get on people, athletes about performance, broadcasters about their style and things they have to say or the things they don't say. I mean, we're all like, there's just this hypercritical world that we're living in. And there's guys there that that just have a hard time with the pressure. Obviously Jamie Baker, when he was a player, had to really work hard to maintain his spot, and probably had a lot of insecurity about losing his spot, and he starts fighting himself mentally over just the various stresses around being a pro hockey player. And the Sharks have welcomed him in, and they've given him this role as the color commentator there. And for Jamie, and this wasn't talked about, Jamie Baker was replacing Drew Remenda when Drew Remenda was enormously popular as the color guy for Sharks fans. So, that's another pressure point for a guy like Jamie to have a high standard there. And there's all the travel and this and that. And, at some point, some people just have, they start to crack. And I think that's what was happening with Jamie Baker. He needed a timeout. He needed to get himself better. And it's obviously quite courageous for him to come out and talk about it in such detail.
I think more and more people who are willing to come out and talk about their struggles is better, because as someone who does struggle with mental health, it when you get into the dark stages of it, no matter how many people say that the stigma's gone, it doesn't matter. You still feel like you're letting people down. You're not living up to what you want as a person, let alone anyone else. So, but the more people come out and talk about it, the better, because it will help eventually get rid of that and make it easier for people to come out and talk about it with whether it is friends, family, or professional help, whatever they need. The more they can do that, the better.
Yeah, I am in full agreement. I don't have that much more to add, but just basically, the more we talk about it, the less the stigma is going to be, and the better we can help each other get through our own struggles and that sort of stuff. But as far as the actual story you referenced, it totally passed by me. I hadn't heard about it until you brought it up.
Yeah, no, it was, Tyler, I saw a little bit when I was flipping around the TV earlier this week, but Tyler pointed out that it's just an important reminder about that. And, for so many reasons, I agree. I think it's so important, and especially in the media world, in the social media world, where it's when someone makes some sort of mistake, we want, especially in a celebrity status, we want to tweet at them. We demand their head at a platter. We saw that a little bit this week in another incident, but we demand their head on the platter, and we don't understand the mental impact that can have on somebody, like what they're going through. It's more than what you're seeing on social media, in my mind. Yeah, I don't think anyone else has anything to add. I don't know, but so is there anything else we need to bring up? I guess one thing I'd want to bring up very quickly. Sean Monahan is out tonight against the Winnipeg Jets. He left the game in the third period. He did not return left the game in the second period. Did not return in the third period. It was supposed to be a flu, but it looks like he's out tonight against the Winnipeg Jets. So he is not better.
It's a big loss for Calgary. Hopefully not long-term for the Flames.
There seems to be some sort of flu going around the league right now. So, because I know that's why Jay Beagle didn't play last night for the Canucks. I think
that's also what affected Mike Smith earlier in the week as well, I believe.
So, Chris, just quickly, you and Hannah, congratulations, by the way. I haven't had a chance to congratulate you and Hannah on your engagement.
Thank you.
And I know that both of you have shared on Twitter your ups and downs in terms of employment. So for those that are friends with you, can you kind of tell us where it looks like you both are back on the employed, or where are you guys at?
Yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster of a month and a half. From us, me being in school, and Hannah, she had been laid off from a job about 2.5 weeks before Christmas. but she was able to get a job probably about 2 weeks after that. So I think she started like first week of January. So while I was in school, I wasn't overly worried, but she was employed at that point in time. Then we got engaged, so there was the high from that. And then after that, I got into a minor accident. I got laid off the day before I wrote my final exam. And then probably about a week later, Hannah found out that she got laid off from the job that she recently got hired. And then on top of that, our landlord had us scared a little bit in the sense that we thought we might have to move on top of that. But turns out that we're all back on our feet. It was just a false alarm as far as the house, so we're still good to stay at our current place. And we have both since been hired at new jobs. So all is on the up and up. The only thing that still needs to get taken care of is my car, and that's about it.
Oh, cool. Well,
so yeah, I feel fairly fortunate and grateful that we've both been able to land on our feet.
Good. I know that things aren't exactly the greatest in Calgary right now, but still, it's good to hear.
Yeah, the Alberta economy is quite up and down, volatile, if you will.
Yeah. And thanks for coming on at last minute that we were able to grab you, and you did great for your first podcast. I applaud Chris. Yay. How do we follow you?
You can find me on most social media at Schneids, SCHNEIDZ.
Okay.
On that, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, most major social media pages.
Cool. Thank you. Tyler, how do we follow you?
I'm on Twitter at TNoble.
Sean?
I am Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter.
And you can follow me at KEVOLE or subscribe to all podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, guys, for coming on and taking part of your Saturday. Thanks all for listening, and we've got a bunch of more stuff coming up, so keep an eye out for that, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.
On the website The Athletic, they published a story that was entitled, "Once at a Place of No Hope, Sharks broadcaster Jamie Baker is gratefully alive." It was beautifully written by Katie Strang, and Bakes is here to talk about it now, and I know this isn't easy, Bakes, but the first thing I got to ask you is why you decided to go public with something that for most people would be so private.
Hanging on here. It's been hard few days.
Hang in there, buddy.
When I took the leave of absence last year, I knew I wanted to talk about it at some point, but I had to be strong enough to do it. I don't look strong right now, but I've been through a lot the last year. I've worked really hard, and I wanted to get the right person. And I had no timetable. I just knew that I wanted to tell a story because it was the right thing to do. Because I've been through a lot of things that people didn't know. And, Bell Let's Talk Day, I guess a month or so ago, I sent out a tweet, and I got some people that contacted me. And I got in touch with Katie Strang and talked to her, and I thought she would be perfect, and I thought she did a really admirable, phenomenal, terrific job. A lot of, background talking to people I know and really getting a historical look at my struggles.
There are so many powerful things in the article, and of course those of us who traveled with you and who count you as a friend knew some of these things that were going on, and I'll leave it for the viewers to read the article and read about some of the tough times. Talk about coming out of the darkness back into the light now, and what it's been like for you this season, being back on the air and being back doing what you love and being around the people you love again in such a positive light.
Well, it starts with your support group, your family and friends, and honestly, I did a little shout out at the post-game show last night and got emotional, and the San Jose Sharks organization has been amazing, and I really, truly hope other organizations and companies can do what the San Jose Sharks have done for me, for people that struggle with mental health issues. They paid me while I was on a leave of absence. They've been with me the whole time. They gave me a job back this year. You guys have been phenomenal, my family, my friends. And then I went and, the NHLPA helped me get a therapist in San Jose and the right psychiatrist. I have medications that have stabilized my brain. done a lot of work, neurofeedback and brain mapping, and then I've created a daily routine. I call it Train the Brain. And through all of that, there's stability. I sleep now, and I don't have all the mood disorders and the impulsiveness and the depression. And I battled depression for 15, 20 years.
Bakes, we are so proud of you for coming out, and it's such a huge step to come public with this. It has inspired thousands, I'm sure. I've had so many messages, I can only imagine what you've had as well. And a shout out to Katie Strang, just a remarkable job. Check it out. It's at theathletic.com, a remarkable